Hey everybody, this episode of the podcast is brought to you by TroyCast.com. Check us out. That's our homepage, www.TroyCast.com. All right, on today's episode, we're going to wrap up our salute to the 90s. I got Erin Miller, my pop culture expert, coming back on, and we're going to discuss the best of 90s TV. So welcome back to the show, Erin Miller. Erin, welcome back. How you doing?
Hey, good. It's great to be back, Tim. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. We always have a good time, and I thought that it would be a good night to do. Well, so for those of you that are just picking up the show from here and haven't listened to previous episodes, Erin and I have been doing a mini pod series, if you will, based on the 90s, and this all came about because we had our 20th class reunion on the week of Thanksgiving. It was actually the Saturday after Thanksgiving. It was a blast, and actually this podcast we wanted to record before the reunion actually happened so that we could play it for the people that we were going to the reunion with. We just thought it'd be kind of fun just to kind of reminisce about some more of the pop culture, and it didn't work out. I had some real world stuff that I had to take care of. Excuse the pun, that the real world pun there. But we didn't get to do it before the reunion, but I still wanted to do it because I was really excited about doing this one. And so what we're doing here is we're talking about both of our top fives from the 90s. It's going to be a similar format what we did with our top five movies, except we're doing TV shows. So Erin, again, welcome back. And we're glad to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this too.
And speaking of the reunion, that was actually the first class reunion that I've been to. Have you ever been? Did you go to the 10-year?
Yes, I was at our 10-year. Yep.
It was a lot different than what I was expecting. So
okay.
You kind of have these preconceived notions about class reunions. You know, you see the American Pie reunion movies. Definitely. There's the Romeo and Michelle high school reunion. Yeah, we should do a podcast on best class reunion.
Best reunion.
I would have to give Grosse Pointe Blank my number one. Have you ever seen that one?
Oh yes, long time ago though.
I don't even know if that was filmed. I don't
really remember it, but yeah, I've seen it.
It's a classic John Cusack and Minnie Driver, and actually semi-early Jeremy Piven. And it was actually it's a kind of a dark comedy, and I kind of cracked I don't remember who it was from our class, but I cracked a Grosse Pointe Blank joke at our reunion, and it fell flat, totally flat. It fell.
They didn't know what they were talking about, huh?
Yeah, somebody asked me, so what are you up to? And they said, what are you up to? I'm a professional killer. Which was what John Cusack was. He was a hitman. I don't know if you remember that movie.
You know, I do, but even if you had said it to me, I don't know that it would have landed. But now that you say it and we're talking about the movie, I definitely remember that.
So I got a blank stare, and then I tried to explain the joke, and it didn't make it any better. But shout out there to Grosse Pointe Blank, which actually I don't believe was even filmed in Detroit, but they did a good job of making it look like Grosse Pointe, at least from what I've seen. So. But again, going back to the reunion, so I arrived there before anybody that I was really close with had gotten there. There was a lot of familiar faces there.
Yep. And
it's been 20 years since I've seen some of the people from our class. So it was kind of awkward in the stance where I didn't know, hey, is it going to be weird if I go up and say hi?
Right. Even though that's what we're there for, but agreed at the same time, it's been 20 years, so.
And I totally thought that Facebook, and I think I said this, I don't know if I mentioned this to you or somebody else while we were there, but I said Facebook has kind of ruined class reunions. And I
totally.
I think to a point it still has, just because I think there's a lot of people there a lot of people that were not there that I think would probably have made an effort to go if Facebook wasn't a thing.
Yeah. And I agree with that.
For the most part, everybody kind of stays in touch through social media. There was a few surprises there, a few people that I haven't seen on social media and haven't seen or talked to in many, many years. And it was great. I mean, first of all, it was great to see everybody.
Oh, it was so fun. Erin and Eugene and Wendy did a great job. I was like, it was a great time.
Yeah, they did a perfect job. I couldn't imagine that have gone any better. We had for the listeners out there, and sorry to bore the non-reunion goers, but we basically had the corner of a local bar reserved out to include a little isolated room where we could set up some of the food and have a little bit of a quiet area where we could catch up. And then about halfway through the evening, we had a DJ come in and played some 90s music. It was actually,
that was great.
It was really cool. It was really nice to see everybody. I enjoyed the hell out of it. It was good to see you. Good to see.
Yeah, you too. I mean, I know we talk and chat all the time, but to actually see you in person was great.
And actually got a lot of love for the show that night. I was really surprised by that. And I was kind of shy when anybody ever mentioned the show, so I just pushed them your way. I just told everybody it was your show.
I know. I don't remember who we were talking to, but you kept telling him it was my podcast. Oh, I think it may be Liz. I think it might have been Liz Festo. You kept telling her it was my podcast.
There may or may not have been a little bit of.
Which is not true. You need to take credit for it.
There may or may not have been a little alcohol involved in that decision.
Fair enough.
So it was good to see everybody. So that's what led us up to doing this episode. The 90s, I was thinking about this today, and I was doing some notes before we did the show, just to come up with some topics on what would be good things to talk about. And I was kind of thinking about this, and I want to get your take on this.
Okay.
I really think, my opinion is, I think the 90s was the golden age of the sitcom. Would you agree or disagree with that?
100%. Because what's interesting is I don't watch a lot of sitcoms now. I feel like TV's changed a bit, especially with Netflix and Hulu and all the shows being on HBO and Showtime. So I feel like I watch a lot more drama shows. But in the 90s, it was all sitcoms. And I actually have a hard time watching some sitcoms now because I compare them to what we had in the 90s and they just don't live up to it for me. So yeah, definitely. And sitcom heavy in the 90s was definitely a trend.
I'm glad you brought up the streaming aspect of that, because I totally think that that's why the sitcom is more or less died off. There is still a few really good sitcoms out there.
Yeah.
But I think most of the great comedy on TV right now is more of it's not necessarily a sitcom format. You have like Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which is I've actually embarrassingly that's on my list. I haven't seen it yet, but it's not your typical. It's from what I've seen.
They're almost more adult sitcoms at this point. In the 90s, it was sitcoms you could sit and watch with your families. There was, TGIF, and there was just all these, great 30-minute sitcoms. There's a lot of funny stuff now that I couldn't let my kids watch.
Exactly. So yeah. So when I think of sitcom, I think of the half-hour weeknight show. You have the laugh track usually.
Yep.
And
usually, or in front of a live studio audience. Yep.
And you have just usually a single set. Occasionally they'll break away from that single set, like Full House. Obviously, it was The House. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which we'll talk about in a little bit here, was the Mansion. Friends obviously mainly took place in the girls' apartment and a little bit in the guys' apartment, and then they bounced to
the coffee house.
Yeah, the coffee house. And I think that a lot of those shows, that's what I think of when I think of sitcom. You think of like a live studio audience on a set, and now the comedy has kind of evolved into, it's a little bit more high quality, and I think some of that comes from budgets. You got these streaming services that are willing to shell out a lot more cash for their shows, so these producers and showrunners are getting a lot more money to do a lot more high quality of a show. And so I think I want to say that the apex of the 90s of the sitcom was in the 90s, and the 80s had some good stuff too. And actually, some of the shows I wanted to put on my list for my top 5 were shows like Cheers that originated in the 80s, and I think it bled over into the 90s.
Just a touch, I think, yeah.
Yeah, like 2 or 3 years possibly. I want to say it ended in 93, possibly 94. I don't remember exactly. I didn't put it on my list because when I think I associate Cheers with more of the 80s, which is, by the way, big shout out to Cheers, because that's one of my favorite sitcoms of all time.
I always enjoyed that too. I watched it with my mom, and just one of those things that gives you like memories,
Yeah, exactly. So you had some good stuff in the 80s, and you had some decent stuff even in the 70s, but I really don't think the sitcom hit its stride until the 90s, and it had a relatively short life, and a lot of that has to do with, like we said, the streaming, the birth of the internet, and and stuff like that. So big shout out to 90s sitcom. So anyways, let's get this underway. What did you have for your number 5 show?
Okay, well, my number 5 is, funny enough, a sitcom, and it's Roseanne.
I love Roseanne. I still love Roseanne.
Oh, I do too. So Roseanne, for me, is one of those shows that I still watch today. I still watch reruns of Roseanne on TV Land. I still like find myself at Halloween wanting to see the Halloween episodes. So part of how I based some of my my selections, my top 5, was stuff that still resonated with me today. There's a lot of stuff as I was going through because I mean, when you it was so general for us. We just decided to pick shows from the 90s. It was different when we did movies. It was such a specific like movies from 99.
Right.
This was so general. So there were a lot of great shows, but I had to pick stuff that to me was still like Roseanne was important to me. Roseanne was one. It started on Tuesday nights, I remember, and I used to watch it with my dad when my mom was at bowling. So I just have so many great memories of watching Roseanne. And I know she's kind of like a hot button topic nowadays, but I was really excited when her show was actually revived for a little while because it's like I grew up watching the Connors and it was like fun to see it again. All these revivals that they're doing now, it really brought back a lot of memories and I enjoyed that.
You bring up a good point there with all the revivals, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that backs up exactly what we were just saying before we started here with the pinnacle of sitcoms being in the 90s. Because otherwise, why else bring all these shows back?
Yeah. I mean, there are quite a few that they've brought back.
Roseanne was such a good show, and it was such an important show. I can't remember a ton of examples of this, but I do remember them breaking a lot of barriers, so to speak, social barriers. I remember seeing my first lesbian kiss on TV on Roseanne, and that might have been a Halloween episode, by the way. Am I wrong on that? Do you remember?
No, it wasn't. Are you talking about the one where Roseanne kisses the girl?
Yes, I think so.
No, that wasn't a Halloween episode, but they were at a bar, I believe.
Or maybe it was her two. Didn't they have lesbian friends that kissed on the Halloween episode?
Oh, and now I'm drawing a total blank of her name, but she married Tom Arnold for a little bit in the show. And yes, then she's a lesbian. And then there's also Roseanne's boss is gay in the show.
Right.
But yeah, one of the biggest barriers I feel like Roseanne broke was just in general her being a female comedian, which back in the 90s was like not, very heard of. So we're talking about early 90s because Roseanne itself, the show started in 1988. So here we have a female comedian and now she's going to have her own sitcom and then they go and name the show after her. Yep. So, right there, that's kind of like a really big deal. And then they make them a blue collar family too. Yeah. They're not like some uppity, family. They're blue collar. They're hardworking. They have, living job to job and paycheck to paycheck.
I think that was probably one of the biggest appeals of that show. They did a normal everyday family, like a family that you could have truly been living next door to, as opposed to a lot of the cookie cutter families that you saw growing up. Leave It to Beaver, the Brady Bunch, you know what I mean by that. They were very real, and they talked about real topics. It wasn't just. It wasn't just, Wally backed into Dad's car or something like that.
Or something that was fixed in 30 minutes. I always laugh when I rewatch Full House episodes because it was like, it's so hokey and then it's fixed in 30 minutes. I mean, it's a great show, but Roseanne wasn't quite like that. It's a different kind of sitcom.
You're probably going to think I'm a moron, but I actually learned about menstruation from Roseanne.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
Do you remember the Darlene gets her first period episode?
Totally. Yep.
So I remember watching that, and I don't know why I remember this, but I was watching it with my mom and my brother, I think. Yeah. And Darlene goes, "I just had my first period, okay?" And I asked my mom, I go, "Mom, what's a period?" And you almost heard like the record scratch and the crickets chirping and the total awkwardness I just threw at my mom. I couldn't have been that old.
Well, you're probably pretty young because I think that happens in like season 1 or 2, which would have been in like 88, 89. So you're probably under 10.
And I don't think I got the full explanation there. I think I got the 8-year-old, 9-year-old version of the process.
We know now as parents, how we, what kind of explanations we give. So.
But those were the type of topics that they talked about in that show. You didn't hear them talking about menstruation on the Brady Bunch.
No. I mean, they talk about like losing their jobs, their electricity's getting cut off. I mean, there's just all sorts of like real life topics.
Even when the show came back, I feel like they still did that. They touched down on the opiate crisis. Wasn't Roseanne popping pain pills from her knee or something like that?
Knee pain, yep.
Yeah, it's such a shame that she ended up leaving the show. I've only caught 1 or 2 since she left, and I thought it was all right from what I saw.
It's all right. I've stopped watching it since.
Yeah, I
because
don't put it.
it's not the same now. I mean, she was obviously such a big part of that show. It's named after her. But I
Yeah.
mean, but the rest of that cast is so great. I mean, John Goodman and Laurie Metcalf and then Johnny Galecki. I mean, they've all gone on to do such like amazing things.
Who would have thought that Johnny Galecki would have been such a success?
The biggest star, pretty much, out
Yeah.
of all of them. I mean,
Speaking
I loved
of
his
which,
character though.
I don't think we can talk about him without mentioning National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
Oh my gosh, no,
Rusty
you're
Griswold.
right. I do think of that every time. I'm like, give this David. And now I don't. I shouldn't even say this. I don't watch The Big Bang Theory, so I don't know his name on there. But yeah,
I think
you're right.
It's Leonard.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. No, Leonard's the main character, isn't he?
Leonard the skinny dude? I can't remember.
I think so. I think so.
What the heck's his name? Well, oh well. Yeah, but he's killing it. He was making like over $1 million an episode on Big Bang Theory.
Yep.
They took a book out of the Friends book, and I think they did the old Unite Against the Network for equal.
Yeah, I think they did
excessive contracts. So good pick. I love Roseanne.
Yeah.
What happened?
That one.
She just kind of flew off the radar though, and I don't. You know me, and in this show, in real life, I don't like to get political. I hate talking politics. I hate talking religion, and she is just taking it to such an extreme.
Well, and unfortunately and fortunately now with Twitter and social media in general, it's so good and it's so bad. People have an outlet to do whatever they want. And some
That's
people,
the good and the bad of it, right?
You know, exactly. It's one thing when you speak and you say something you shouldn't say, but when we're tweeting stuff and then we're consciously making an effort to hit send, she clearly made a mistake. You know, she paid dearly for it. So
blame the Ambien.
Yeah, right.
You gotta love Ambien's response. I don't know if it was Pfizer or whatever drug company makes Ambien. They fired back at her when they heard that she was blaming it on the Ambien. They said there are many side effects of Ambien. Racist language is not one of them.
Is not one of them.
Right. I thought that was kind of great. But you know, everybody's entitled to their political opinion. I'm not going to knock her for having that political opinion. But with that being said, just because you're famous and I enjoy watching you on a TV show, it doesn't mean I want to hear your politics crammed down my throat.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, her remark was a little racist also. So
yeah,
it just was inappropriate and it shouldn't have been said. And I think she since apologized, but the damage had been done, and you know, ABC did what they had to do. So.
But here's a question: 10 years ago, do you think she would have been canceled? Because we're living in the middle of the cancel culture now.
No, I honestly think that 10 years ago, no, she wouldn't have been canceled. I think our culture has gotten way too sensitive, and I don't want that to come across as I agree with what she said. Like, that's not it at all. But I just think we live in a society now where everybody's like, you know, it's real touchy. You know, I remember seeing a meme on Facebook once saying, "What are we offended by today?" Because that's pretty much it. I mean, everybody's offended by something every day. So
it seems like there's a life cycle. It seems like there's a life cycle to every I'm drawing a blank on the word to use here. It seems like there's like a life cycle for every controversy that's out there. Like, look at Louis C.K. The story comes out about Louis C.K. and following the story comes everybody giving their story, and then comes the apology, and then comes the canceling. Yep. You're canceled. You don't work for a long time, and then you come back and everybody forgets about what you did.
Exactly. Yep.
Not always though. I mean, there's certain
things for sure.
I don't think R. Kelly's going to be having a comeback. I don't think Bill Cosby's going to have a comeback.
No, I think what he's done is going to just send him off the map. So.
But Louis C.K. is working. I mean, he's working. I can't believe that.
Yeah. No, I was a little surprised too. I mean, that really wasn't that long ago either. So.
No, and I mean, and there's people out there defending him. They're saying like, oh, well, it's not like he assaulted anybody. He just whipped it out and started playing with it. And like, dude, you can't do that.
No.
Anyways, we're getting way off topic here.
I know.
So
we always do.
your number 5 was Roseanne. My number 5, I'm going a completely different direction. I originally had a sitcom in my number 5 slot, and I thought about it, and I had to do a little bit of a switcheroo, and I'll get to my number 4 was actually my prior number 5. My number 5 is going to be Sopranos. Now, the reason why I kind of wrestled with even putting this one on my list, and the reason for that is because Sopranos actually debuted, I believe it was January of 1999, so it just caught the tail end of the 90s, but I don't associate the pinnacle of Sopranos with the 90s. I think peak Sopranos was probably season 2 through season 4.
Okay, so early 2000.
Yeah. But Sopranos, I feel, was so revolutionary that I couldn't leave it off my list because it caught the tail end of the 90s.
Yeah.
Now, this wasn't like Cheers, where Cheers was a great show and Cheers had a lot of great stuff about it, but I felt like Sopranos ushered in a completely new era of TV. HBO had done shows. They had done hour-long. Was Sex in the City an hour, or was Sex in the City 30 minutes? Do you remember?
It was 30 minutes.
Okay, well, it was the same type of deal, though, where
Yep.
these premium cable channels, HBO and Showtime, started doing. They had done their own shows before. Like Larry Sanders was on HBO,
Yep.
I think, as early as maybe the 80s and also into the 90s. Which, by the way, that's sadly I've never seen that. And everybody knocks me for that.
I've seen bits and parts to know what it's like.
The thing about Sopranos was I felt like you got like a half of a movie every week with that show. It was so well done. Everything, the attention to detail. It wasn't just done on like one set. They had multiple sets. They had the Bada Bing, that's the strip club that one of Tony's buddies owned. They had Tony's house. They did have some regular sets, but they also ventured to different places. So the production value, though, it was so good. The music was great. I mean, I remember watching the first episode, and that was one of those shows where it wasn't a slow burn for me. I remember I was hooked on the first episode.
Yep.
And the other thing that I feel like Sopranos was revolutionary on was that was at the very beginning of when TV networks started releasing full seasons of shows. And Sopranos was actually the first show that I ever rented. I remember going to Blockbuster. I watched the whole first season because a friend of mine had the DVD set, and I binged it. That was the first show I binged. And then,
really?
Yep. And then I didn't have HBO wherever I was living at the time, so I didn't actually go back and start season 2 until 2001. I remember I was going to Grand Valley for college, and I went to Blockbuster on a random Saturday night, and I saw that they had season 2 of Sopranos there. I'm like, oh man, I am gonna have to clear my calendar.
Yeah. It's one of those shows that you actually have to binge. You can't just stop watching it, right?
Yeah. And so I rented it, and I end up binging the whole season.
Did you rent it on VHS?
No, it was actually DVD.
Well,
I watched.
DVD.
We had a PlayStation 2 in the townhouse I lived in.
Nice.
And so we were very high tech and
yeah.
No,
I know. I think back to college, and I was definitely still taping things on my VCR.
I definitely had a VCR in my room, but in our living room we had a PS2, and so we got to rent and watch DVDs on that. So I rented the whole season and I binged it, and so that's why I felt like that show was important to put on the list, because as we saw the end of the 90s and ushering in this new internet tech era.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I feel like Sopranos and Sex and the City were probably two of the first like big shows on those cable networks to get things going. I mean, they kind of took over TV and the award shows. And
you had there was other shows that probably did it a little bit earlier than them.
Yeah.
But not at this level. Sopranos
I would say
was
not
like
as successful.
Yeah, successful. Sopranos was like a cultural phenom.
Yeah.
I mean, I was, like I said, I was hooked from the beginning.
Right, you had Sopranos, I had Sex and the City. I mean, as a female, like Sex and the City was like such a great show for all of us women.
And that was actually filmed on scene too, I think.
Yep.
Sex and the City.
Yes, it was.
I want to say Sopranos I want to say a lot of it was filmed on scene. I don't know about all of it. I should have done a little bit more research to verify that. But a lot of good actors in Sopranos. You had James Gandolfini, God rest his soul, an amazing actor. Heard a lot of stories about how amazing of a person he was.
Yeah, that's all I heard was what a wonderful guy he was and how great he was to work with.
Just a gentle giant, and he played this conflicted mob boss. I mean, you weren't just watching Goodfellas in a 60-minute episode every week. There was some depth to Tony Soprano. Just the whole concept of the show starts off. You have a major organized crime. He wasn't the boss at the time. At the beginning of the show, he was just, I think he was a captain.
Yeah.
But he was going to therapy because he was having panic attacks. And this was also where people being prescribed antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication became more mainstream, and people were coming out of the closet, so to speak, with having to use this medication. So here you have this mob boss on TV he's in therapy because he's having panic attacks, and he's talking to a therapist. He's taking medication for it, and it's all a big secret. And then on the main part of his life, he's this gruff gangster. And then to add another dynamic to his character, he is also a father and a husband. He had 2 kids that were relatively normal kids, and in the show, and it was I don't know, I just can't say enough about it. That was one of those shows that I was really disappointed when it finally ended, and it's I don't know, it's definitely on my top 5 of all time. It might be it's sometimes if you ask me, it'll be my number 1 show of all time. Sometimes it's usually, top 2 or 3.
I know we've gone back and forth on this because I know you've told me that because we've talked about some of our favorite shows. So I know it's right up there for you. It's between top 3 and 3 because I know we've gone Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad also. So
yes, yeah. So that's my number 5. It could have been an honorable mention. Pick. And now that I actually bring that up, did you have any honorable mentions before we go any deeper into our list?
Kind of. I had one more sitcom that. And, this is funny because I didn't actually watch this show in the 90s. I watch it now on TV Land, but Everybody Loves Raymond is just a show that I really enjoy. There's nothing super specific about it with like Roseanne where it was like groundbreaking and stuff. It was just a show that I honestly can't believe I didn't watch it when it was on because when I watch it now, I mean, I've seen every episode probably 5, 6, 7 times. Just a show that I just think is hilarious. And, just the dynamic of having like your in-laws right next door and the brother. I mean, they all just play their characters so well. And it's just such a great, great 90s sitcom.
I'm going to test your knowledge.
Okay.
Which National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation character was in Everybody Loves Raymond?
Oh, the mom.
Yep, you nailed it.
Her real name is leaving me at the moment, but.
Yeah, that Raymond's a good show. I never watched it when it was on the air. I have caught it in reruns. I have loved the shows that I have watched. Ray Romano actually was awesome in The Irishman. I finally got done watching that. I don't know if I when we caught up at the reunion, I don't know if we talked about that at all. But
I don't think we had talked about it yet. I talked about it with my dad, I think, not you. I haven't watched it yet. I've been in Christmas movie mode, but between December 26th and January 5th when the Golden Globes are on, I have this whole list of movies that I need to watch so I can be prepared for award season.
You got to watch The Irishman. I don't want to get too in depth in
absolutely.
it because that's a whole podcast in itself. But I will say Joe Pesci steals the show.
We can do that another time.
Yes.
After I've watched it in January, we can do The Irishman.
We'll do The Irishman in January. So my honorable mention I'm going to give to Saved by the Bell. And that's.
Yes. Yes. I mean, who didn't watch Saved by the Bell?
I'm a little embarrassed to add that as an honorable mention.
Everybody watched it. You don't have to be embarrassed.
Everybody our age.
That.
I don't think any adults were watching it back then.
Oh, my dad watched it. He definitely did.
That's awesome. You just totally outed your dad.
That's okay. He doesn't care. He watches everything.
That's
okay. Like I said, he watched The Irishman already. He's seen everything. He watches more TV than I do. I'm jealous.
I used to be obsessed with Saved by the Bell. I used to try to style my hair like Zach Morris.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Did you want to wear your pants as high as AC Slater?
No, I never tight rolled them. I think he wore the Z Cavaricis.
Oh yeah.
And tight rolled them. I'm not going to use any names, but a very good friend of mine definitely tight rolled his Z Cavaricis, his black Z Cavaricis, and he knows who he is.
I know who he is. I'm pretty sure.
You know who he is too. I'm not going to use any names. But Saved by the Bell, that's one I wish that they would bring back. And I heard a rumor they are bringing it back. And
I heard a rumor about that too. I would love to see the 6 of them back together again, even if it was a 2-hour movie or something. That would be great.
I heard Mark Paul is too busy to do it. So if they can't bring him back, I'm out.
Then don't do it. Right.
Right. Screech is down. Screech.
He's got nothing else going on for sure.
Right. Honorable mention to Saved by the Bell. I don't want to devote too much time to it just because it's an honorable mention. So
you're already embarrassed that you brought it up, so we'll move on.
I'm not going to be as embarrassed as you out and your father.
Nah, he likes it. He's good.
Taking a beating here. All right, so what's your number 4?
My number 4 is way different, and it is The Real World, which I am so excited to talk about because as I was digging into The Real World and looking into it and stuff, it's just kind of amazing that it started in 1992.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
It's still on today. It did take a brief break a couple years ago, but it is still on today. It doesn't have new seasons on MTV anymore. I believe they're on Facebook Watch.
Really?
Yeah. But I think they're on season 33 of The Real World.
Wow.
And it's just Real World. It revolutionized, the way reality TV goes, because I'm pretty sure that it's probably arguable, but I think it was the first reality show, the first true reality show.
Yeah. I don't know if it's the first reality show, but it's definitely the first reality show as we know reality TV today.
Yes.
And actually, I think maybe it is the first reality show. I mean, would documentaries count as reality? I don't think
I mean,
they do.
that's what I'm saying. I feel like it's up for debate whether you want to count something like that or not. But I feel like it's the first like true reality show when we think about what, those shows are now.
Yeah, I totally agree with that statement.
But the Real World then created, there's a spinoff, Road Rules, where, they went around and did different challenges. And then Road Rules was on for 14 seasons. And then that evolved into what is still on today is the MTV Challenge, which is now taping its 35th season right now, which is my ultimate guilty pleasure, one of my absolute favorite TV shows in the whole wide world. We watch all these great, Big Brother, Survivor, and it's always fun to see some returning characters come back and battle it out again. Well, the challenge is constantly returning characters. That's all it is. So they have these built up rivalries. They fight on Twitter. I mean, it's just great. So you get this like great mess of reality TV and drama mixed in with these like crazy, insane challenges. And then you have famous BMXer TJ Lavin hosting the challenges. But okay, so that kind of goes off on where I was really starting with The Real World. The Real World was so great when it started because they literally just, picked 7 strangers to live in a house and, get to know one another. And They dealt with so many different things: prejudice, politics, religion, romance. They had all sorts of different homophobia. I mean, in Pedro's season, which was, I believe, San Francisco, I think it was season 3, he was living with AIDS. And I know that he died several seasons after that, and they had a funeral on MTV and stuff. And
that was a huge deal.
It was a huge deal because it was a huge, like when HIV and AIDS was like, it was a big like kind of crisis and big deal. Then too.
Everybody loved Pedro, so it was a big deal for the fans too. I remember I didn't watch Real World in the beginning. I remember I heard about some of the big characters like Puck and Pedro.
Puck is one of the ones on my list. He was one of your first like villains from a reality show.
You're right. He totally was. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Oh, you're good. I was just saying, I mean, there were things that you saw on the show that people were dealing with. People were dealing with eating disorders. Pedro was living with AIDS. There was a girl on there, Irene maybe, had cystic fibrosis. Wow. There were some that were self-harming, whether it was cutting or other things. It was just like the first few seasons like really dealt with like real things. They had to get a job through the show and like they went to work and stuff like that. As the seasons went on, it became more about what the theme was. We're going to bring back their exes and whatnot. So it changed a bit throughout the year. But when The Real World started, it was really just about those people and getting to like a glimpse, basically Big Brother, get a glimpse and just watch them on TV. And some of these people have gone on to have actually like pretty big careers. And some of them have gone on to be models and actors. And Mike the Miz Mazowski has gone on to be a WWE wrestler. And
The Miz started on Real World?
Yeah, he was on Real World, Miami maybe, one of those. I can't remember which one exactly, but yeah, that's where The Miz came from.
Wow. So the thing about The Real World, I felt like when it started, and I don't remember this to be verbatim or anything, but it seemed like it was focused more on documentary and less on, like you said, like the theme aspect.
Yes.
And I feel like that gave birth to Survivor. So basically Survivor was The Real World on an island with competitions.
Yep.
Like it was almost like network TV felt like our attention span couldn't quite handle just The Real World, so they had to throw in competition in there to manufacture drama.
Competition and sleeping outside.
Yeah, and sleeping outside with the bugs.
Yep, exactly. But no, I just feel like The Real World like really laid the groundwork for, all the shows to come. We were pretty young at the time. I mean, I was 11 years old when The Real World came out, so I didn't like religiously watch it when I was that young. But I think by the time I got to high school and maybe even middle school, I was watching it. It wasn't quite as crazy as it is now, but I was definitely a watcher. I still remember a lot of the people, like when I was going through and seeing some of the names, I'm like, oh my gosh, that person, just remembering some of these people that were on this show. So
yeah, same here. I remember being aware of it when it first came out. I don't remember watching it religiously for a few years. And I remember there was a few seasons where I did watch it. I don't remember which ones offhand. Possibly London. Was that one of the first seasons?
London, yeah, that was one of the first seasons. That one had CT, who was like one of the biggest MTV Challenge, personalities there is.
I remember watching London and Vegas. I remember being really good too. Where
Vegas,
didn't they live on
season.
Was that the one where they lived on top of the palms?
Yes, the palms. Yes.
That was a great a great season too.
Yeah. A lot of great characters in those in that show.
Has Puck been back for anything recently?
Puck came back for one of the challenges, I want to say, but it was a long time ago.
He's got to be pushing 60 by now, I imagine.
I mean, he's got to be up there. I don't know about 60, maybe
At least 50.
Yeah, I would say about 50.
Because he wasn't a kid when he came on that, if I remember right.
I don't think so. I think he was probably in his early 20s.
And he was awful to Pedro, wasn't he?
I think the oldest you could be on that show was 26.
He was a jerk to Pedro, wasn't he?
Oh, he's terrible. He was such a dick. He was like.
Did he get kicked off his season?
He did. He was the first person to get kicked out of the show too.
That's awesome. He's kind of like the Russell Hantz of Russell Hantz of the real world.
He's one of those characters who I like. You hated because he was a villain, but you also like secretly loved him because it was a lot of the stuff he did was funny.
Yeah, I mean everybody who doesn't love drama.
Yeah. I mean when he was addicted to Pedro, nobody liked that because everybody loved Pedro, but some of the other stuff he did was just hilarious. Right.
Well, good pick with the real world.
Yeah, I was excited about that one.
So for my number 4, it was actually my former number 5. I had to go with The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Yo, Holmes to Bel-Air.
Woo! Does anybody not know that theme song? I mean, if that comes on, you're singing it, right? Like
another friend of mine who will still, well, the same friend of mine who will remain nameless for the Z Cavaricis did you see the
birth announcement?
The birth announcement to the Fresh Prince.
I'm like, we're on the same page here. Yep.
It was great.
It was fabulous.
And now he definitely knows that we were talking about him with the Z Cavaricis.
Because if he didn't know before, he knows now.
No, I love the show. It was on Monday nights. It was on, I think it was on at 8 o'clock, which was prime time. And it was one of those things where like, it was something to set me up for Monday Night Football. I felt like I liked to watch it. And back then, like before DVR was around, you had to make time to watch these shows. You couldn't just because nobody knew how to fucking set their DVR.
There was no DVR.
VCR.
No, I think I used my VCR, but it was like literally hitting record like on the TV at the time. I mean, this was way before setting your VCR. I think this show started in 1990, which I couldn't believe it was that old.
Allegedly, some geniuses out there figured out a way to program their VCRs back in the 90s. I definitely wasn't one of those guys, so I had to catch everything live.
I was also probably home because I was like 9 years old, so I probably wasn't doing much.
So Fresh Prince started in 1990?
Yes, can you believe that?
Unreal. No, I would have guessed if you would have asked, if you would put a gun to my head and tell me what year. Obviously, I didn't research this one as much as I should have, but I would have guessed 95, maybe 94.
Yeah, I would have guessed mid 90s also. But I think the show is so great. I mean, here you have Will Smith, who started as a rapper, mind you. Like when you look at him today, it just makes me laugh to think like he started as a rapper. In some of his like songs, Parents Just Don't Understand, Girls Ain't Nothing But Trouble. So,
Nightmare
Summertime.
On My Street.
Nightmare on My Street. Yes, I mean that's how he started, and then he transitions into this comedy. Like, and now he has like this big A-list movie star resume. I just think he's like, I love his like transition. He reminds me a lot of Tom Hanks in the sense that Tom Hanks started on this little funny comedy, Bosom Buddies, and then becomes one of the biggest A-list celebrities that there is.
Yeah, that is a great comparison. And Will Smith.
Yeah, I've always thought that with them.
There's been a few points in his career too where there's been no bigger movie star than Will Smith. I would say he's been at the top of the A-list at multiple times of his career. When they gave him that Ali role, he was probably at the first pinnacle of his career. Yep. And then he had some busts in the cinema, but then he came back with Pursuit of Happiness, which was awesome.
I liked that movie a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great movie. He's had a lot of good stuff, and Fresh Prince. I loved the comedy was hilarious. The acting was hilarious. I can't say enough about that show. I used to love. It was one of the reasons why I didn't dread Mondays coming up. It was because of Fresh Prince growing up.
No, I agree. It was just a good one, a good all around cast. I loved the bit characters with Jeffrey and his best friend. What was his best friend's name in it?
Jazz.
Jazz, yeah.
And that was DJ Jazzy Jeff.
From the rap group. Yeah, those two relationships that he had with those two were just hilarious. And then there was, their cousin Hillary and Carlton, and it was, and Uncle Phil. I mean, a great show.
It was such a funny dynamic too. It was the fish out of water dynamic. You're bringing in Will Smith from West Philadelphia, born and raised. moving out to Bel-Air. It was a great fish out of water Beverly Hills Cop type of dynamic where it made for good comedy, and the rewatchability of it, unfortunately, I don't see that show
I don't
anymore.
know that it's on really anymore. I bet it's streaming somewhere. I bet it's on one of the things that I pay for. But you're right. It's not one of those shows that's on some of these other shows that I have are on TV Land and TBS and, CMT. They're on all the time. But you're right. I don't see Fresh Prince on anymore very much.
I want to say, didn't Blossom follow Fresh Prince for a little while, or was Blossom on Tuesdays?
I think so, because I believe that they crossed over at some point.
I think you're right.
I'm pretty sure that they had a crossover.
Yep, and then led, like I said, it led right up to Monday Night Football, which topped off my Monday night TV watching.
Started your Monday off good.
Yeah, I loved it. There was a reason not to dread Mondays, and
totally.
Will Smith and the crew was my reason. So number 4, Fresh Prince. So what do you got for your number 3?
All right, number 3, the only drama on my list, which is weird because they're all dramas now, but the best high school drama of the 90s, Beverly Hills 90210. I mean,
I knew it.
Yeah,
I knew that was going to be on that list.
Oh, it's so funny to think back about this show because, again, it started in 1990 and I was in 3rd grade and I watched the show. And I laugh now because I'm like, seriously, my mother let me watch this show because my daughter is in 3rd grade and there's no way she would be watching this show right now. But my mom let me. I know she did. And I laugh about it because I know Jessica used to sneak this show when she was in 3rd grade because her mother would not let her watch it. But yeah, I mean, this was just such an iconic show for high school. I mean, and it was fun because it was high school in Beverly Hills. And kind of like Fresh Prince, you have 2 transplant kids from Minnesota. And here they are in Beverly Hills, which I imagine is very night and day from Minnesota. And again, another show that deals with so many different issues. And I wrote down a few of them because I was laughing. We used to joke about the things that Kelly Taylor had been through because she'd literally been through everything. But some of the stuff that I remembered was just different sorts of physical abuse from a boyfriend. They dealt with stealing, drugs, eating disorders, stalking, kidnapping. In one of the first few seasons, Scott, one of David's friends, shot himself accidentally. They dealt with rape, they dealt with AIDS, they dealt with sex, adoption, drunk driving, and those were just like the things I could think of off the top of my head.
That was everybody or just Kelly?
That wasn't just Kelly. That was everybody. But those were just like something. Kelly, I can't even remember now. I remember she got burned in a fire and she was kidnapped and someone tried to kill her. I mean, there were so many things that happened to Kelly. They were so like obscure that it would be very comical actually to figure out everything that actually happened to her. But this show became so popular. I think it was after the 2nd season. They actually did a summer season of it for like 6 episodes.
Did they really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. It's just, you look back and you see Aaron Spelling, who started the show, one of the richest, movie people at that time. And his daughter, Tori Spelling, had to audition for the show and pretended not to be his daughter to actually get the part.
I didn't know that.
And she did get the part. And she had auditioned for somebody else, and I don't remember if they created the part of Donna for her or not, but she ends up getting the part. And then you have Gabrielle Carteres, who is playing a high school sophomore, and she's 30 years old in real life. So just like some funny dynamics. I think Donna and David were the only ones that were like of actual age. I think they were like 16 when the show started, and everybody else was in their early 20s. And then you had Gabrielle, who was 30. But yeah, there were just so many great things that happened in the show. So many, like, as I got older, obviously not while I was in 3rd grade, but when you get in high school and college, so many, like, just some relatable topics. Not everything was quite as extreme as the list I, listed off earlier. But one of the Donna Martin Graduates episode still, like, just makes me laugh. I think I actually have a shirt. I'm pretty sure I still have it that says Donna Martin Graduates. She got caught drinking at prom, if you don't remember, because you may not have watched the show as religiously as I did. And then she was going to get, maybe expelled, and she wasn't going to graduate. And of course it goes to court and, she gets to graduate with everybody, but big episode.
So I wasn't a huge fan of the show. I didn't watch a lot of it live when it was on. I caught a few episodes here and there. I actually think I went to a couple of watch parties with you over to Jessica's house when we were in high school.
Yep.
And I remember just being more concerned with playing basement basketball with her brother than actually watching the episode. But I totally respect the cultural significance of the show. Did Luke Perry and what's his name? Jason Priestley, do they single-handedly bring back sideburns into style?
I really think they might have. I mean, I have to think back to the 90s, and I don't really remember what the style was, but I don't think it was sideburns. I mean, to me, when people talk about Luke Perry, at the time they always compared him to James Dean. So I think like the sideburns were more of a 60s type reference. But yeah, they definitely, I think, brought back the sideburns and the hair.
The sideburns went away, and then they came back. I remember that show came on, and I remember seeing Jason and Luke on the show having sideburns, and I remember all of a sudden everybody in the high school ages had sideburns, and it didn't just go away. It wasn't a passing fad. I think I even had sideburns when I was in high school.
See, you didn't watch 90210, but you copied their fads, huh?
Yep, definitely. And what do you think about you can't call it a reboot. What is that? The new show? It's like
it was 6 episodes and it's done and over with now because I've heard they're not renewing it. But it was
really
very interesting.
My wife is gonna be devastated by that.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was basically all the characters came back and they were playing like their real live selves, Jason Priestley and Jenny Garth.
But like a fictionalized version, right?
Yes, and they were playing like fictionalized versions of themselves, but still a real version of themselves, but it was just, dramatized basically.
Right.
And some of it made up. But then they were playing their characters. They were trying to get a reboot for 90210 like within the show.
Right.
It was entertaining. The first episode was probably the best one. It was just so nostalgic to see them all together again.
A lot of inside jokes.
And it was obviously shortly
episode.
After Luke Perry. Luke Perry had just passed away, so it was shortly after that.
Yeah.
And they did a lot of references to him, and that was really nice. As the episodes went on, it wasn't fabulous, but I enjoyed watching it because I just had such great memories of that show growing up, and those characters were also, still just resonate with me, and I just loved them all. So I was bummed to see that it wasn't getting picked up for a second season because it was only 6 episodes to begin with. So
yeah, I hadn't heard that, but
understand that.
That was a great concept, though. I don't think that had really been done thoroughly on TV. I know Larry David brought the whole Seinfeld crew onto Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, yep,
and they played fictionalized versions of themselves, and I want to say they were maybe talking about doing a reboot in that show too, so kind of a similar thing, but it wasn't. I believe that was just for like an episode or 2 or something, nothing like this where it was the basis of a series where you had these actors playing themselves.
It was interesting. It wasn't like Will and Grace or Roseanne where it was just a reboot of the show and like a continuation of it. This was like a whole separate idea, and it was interesting. It was it was entertaining. I enjoyed it.
A lot of good actors and a lot of good careers. Jason Priestley had a nice little run. He was in Tombstone. Yep. Luke Perry, he would show up every 5-10 years with something magnificent. He was on wasn't he on Oz? Oh God, I can't remember. I think he was on Oz for a little bit. He was on some other HBO shows too. He would show up, and then who else was on that show that kept showing
Tiffany
up?
Amber Thiessen came onto that show later.
Yep.
And she did some good things after that. Luke Perry, Tori Spelling. Tori didn't do much. She had a reality show after, which was like pretty funny to watch actually. Ian Ziering he did all the Sharknadoes, which in the grand scheme of things are not like huge movies, but they were huge in like that genre.
Right.
I think they're on the 4th Sharknado now.
That also resurrected what's her name from American Pie?
Oh yes.
The blonde.
Tara Reid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the Sharknadoes yet.
I haven't either, but I've seen, I know enough. I watch enough TV to know what the general idea is. So it's basically, like a comedy drama.
I will also say I love the commercial to the reboot where you had the alarm clock.
Yep. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was good. And again, just a nostalgic feeling hearing that, those few chords. Everybody knows what that is.
Yeah, you didn't have to be a super fan to know that. I didn't watch a show religiously, and I knew exactly what that was as soon as I heard it.
Yep.
Good pick. So my number, what are we on, number 3 now?
Number 3.
My number 3 was actually Saturday Night Live.
Oh.
And
this is an exciting one to talk about. I'm excited about this.
This is a controversial pick because the show has obviously been around since the 70s and it's still going on today. But the reason why I picked it for for the 90s is I felt like this was the golden age for Saturday Night Live.
I totally agree, because I don't watch Saturday Night Live much now, and I didn't watch it much before the 90s, but in the 90s, I watched Saturday Night Live.
I still watch it today, but today is more or less I fast forward to Weekend Update and the musical guest, unless there happens to be a really good guest where I want to see the.
You want to see
where I want to see all the skits. But back in the 90s, man, the talent that went through that show.
Yeah.
And let me skip back. I'll get back to that part of it. But go there. Saturday Night Live. Let's not get it twisted here. There's a reason why by the 90s came along. The show had still been on for 20 years by then. Yeah. It had some good runs. It had some really good runs. The talent that went through there, you had Belushi, you had Steve Martin, you had Eddie Murphy,
Dan Aykroyd,
Martin Short. There was some great talent on there, but I felt like the 90s gave birth to so many really good careers. The cast that I'm thinking of in general, I'll just name some of the people that I absolutely loved on there. Dana Carvey was Mr. Saturday Night Live. Everybody thought everybody just assumed he was. Yeah, he did everything. He did Church Lady, Garth on Wayne's World.
Oh my gosh.
He had so many good characters.
Did Wayne and Garth come from Saturday Night Live?
Yes, they did.
Oh my gosh.
Wayne's World started on Saturday Night Live.
That's awesome.
Yep, and everybody thought that Dana Carvey was going to be the next like Eddie Murphy type that's going to break off and make all these good movies. Once he left the show, he had some good movies, but nothing that was really great.
He peaked. Yeah, he kind of peaked there. But he was still in Saturday Night Live, still one of the greats from that.
You had Chris Farley in that in the 90s. Chris Farley, Saturday Night Live is some of the best. Matt Foley, the motivational speaker. The Chippendale skit, by the way.
Oh my gosh.
Can you not watch that without tearing up now? Because Farley and Swayze are both dead.
I know.
It's so sad. Like that used to come on the Pistons games. I remember seeing I'm sure they still do it at professional sports events, but they'll play that video and they'll pan around to the crowd and watch everybody do their little dance. But Chris Farley doing Matt Foley. I show that video to my kids and they even appreciate it 20 years later. Watching Matt Foley, motivational speaker.
Yep.
Living in a van down by the river.
Down by the river. Yep. Oh my gosh.
Phil Hartman, another great comedian, gone way too soon, but he also, man, he had some good stuff on there too. Adam Sandler was in the 90s. He obviously became Adam Sandler, and I was actually watching an interview with him on 60 Minutes. Do you watch 60 Minutes?
I do not. No.
So he was on 60 Minutes this past Sunday. And they were talking about just how he almost got. I think he almost got fired off Saturday Night Live, or he did get fired off Saturday Night Live.
Really?
Basically NBC told Lorne Michaels that they didn't think he was funny, and he was pretty much done. And then he said when he came back to host the show many years later, he cracked a joke about how NBC he wasn't good enough for NBC, but I don't know. It was hilarious, and Adam Sandler.
But he's good enough for the box office. And he's made like probably billions of dollars.
Yeah, he's like a billionaire now, I think.
Oh my gosh.
Or maybe his movies have. I'm sorry, he's not a billionaire, but his movies have earned over like $5 billion or something, something crazy like that.
I can't even think of his movies right now, but he's been in everything.
So you had Adam Sandler, Chris Rock was in that cast.
Yep.
He goes on to be one of if there was a short time there, well, not even a short time, maybe a long time. Chris Rock was probably the top stand-up comedian for a little while. Mm-hmm. I remember watching Bigger and Blacker and loving it. I thought Bigger and Blacker was one of the best stand-up routines I had seen since Eddie Murphy Raw back in the 80s. So I mean, just the talent that went through that show. I'm sure I'm missing some more.
Oh yeah, a few more. Here, I have a few more.
Mike Myers.
Will Ferrell.
Will Ferrell started in the 90s.
Yep. Will Ferrell, Mike Myers, Jimmy Fallon.
Jimmy Fallon started in the 90s too?
Yep. Wow. Tracy Morgan and David Spade. Those are the ones I had noted. Yeah.
All those guys, like these were.
They didn't. I don't think they all crossed over necessarily. I think Jimmy Fallon was kind of at the end, but obviously Chris Rock, David Spade, Adam Sandler, Chris Farley, they were all together. That group, and then they go on to do Grown Ups and stuff like that together. So they were all, the same era.
I love those movies too, where Sandler and his buddies they basically.
I know.
It's pretty much the same movie every time, but it's.
They're all a few Billy Madison and Happy Gilmore and Big Daddy. Yeah, they all show up.
Grown Ups, Chuck and Larry, all those guys.
Chuck and Larry, yes. And then they say Kevin Hart, not Kevin Hart. Doug Heffernan, what's his real name?
Kevin James.
Yeah, Kevin James. They see he kind of took
Doug
over.
Heffernan.
It's definitely not Kevin Hart. He kind of took over Chris Farley's, the big guy role. That's when they had him on Grown Ups, and him and Adam Sandler did Chuck and Larry together.
Yeah.
But yeah, SNL definitely.
Tim Meadows.
Tim Meadows, yes.
The ladies' man.
Yeah, there were so many good skits in the 90s. I always think of Mike Myers when he did Philip, the little kid at the playground, and he's like he's tethered to the equipment, and he's like can't get away from it because his mom like trapped him there.
Yeah, they had so many skits like that you could never get away with now.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the outrage if they did that again?
No. Oh, the mothers would be so mad. It'd be like people writing in. I mean, I'm sure they got a lot of kickback on some of the stuff they did then, but now, like we said earlier with Roseanne, you can't get away with anything now. Nothing is.
With the cancel culture, yeah, there's a lot of stuff you wouldn't be able to get away with anymore.
Yeah.
And even it felt like that a lot of that's come on like in the last 10, 15 years too, like more recently than what you would think.
Yeah, so, I think a lot of it is social media. But
yeah. All right, so SNL is my number 3. Am I missing any other characters that we should?
I don't think so. Those were the main ones. I mean, there were some female characters, but they weren't nearly as famous and are not nearly as famous now as the guys that we mentioned.
So what did you have for your number 2?
My number 2 is my favorite sitcom from the 90s. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that because my number 1 is also a sitcom, but this sitcom has one of my favorite actors of all time and still one of my favorite to this day, and it's Home Improvement.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't put that on my list.
Home Improvement is another one that was on Tuesdays for a long time, so I always watched it with my dad. And
it switched to Wednesdays eventually, didn't it?
It did switch to Wednesdays eventually.
I can't believe I remember that.
I know, isn't that funny? I know I can remember what was on TGIF and stuff like that. I can just, there's just certain things that you remember, and it was just one of those shows that my dad was like, at the time, he was working and he was kind of a serious guy, but Home Improvement just got him going. I mean, he just cracked up. He thought Tim the Toolman Taylor was the funniest thing in the world, and he was. I mean, I just found Tim Allen to be hilarious when he did those few episodes on Tool Time where he did like the man's bathroom and the man's kitchen. I mean, I just thought that show was just hilarious. And I loved that they had, 3 boys, and him and Jill were like so in love, and just everything about that show just makes me happy. It's another one I still watch to this day. It's on CMT every day, and I watch it every single day for
I think that's streaming on something too. I don't remember what.
I'm pretty sure it's on Hulu. I'm pretty sure.
That's one that we eventually want to show our kids because I think the kids could still appreciate that.
Oh, definitely.
There's another one that
my daughter Rogan watches it every once in a while when it's on with me. She knows what it is and she thinks it's hilarious. And of course, Tim Allen is then, the Santa Claus, so she knows him from that. And it's definitely fairly kid friendly. Again, in the 90s, they could get away with doing a little bit more than they can do nowadays. But for the most part, pretty
and it had JTT, who didn't love themselves some JTT back then.
Oh my gosh. I mean, one of the biggest heartthrobs for our age back then. I mean, yeah, it was amazing. We loved him.
Everybody loved him and his older brother. I don't remember what his name was. Zachary Taylor,
Zachary Ty Bryant.
Wow. You're a super fan.
I was, and I still am. I love this show. I worked for a wedding coordinator for a while, and one of the weddings I went to, Tim Allen was there, and I said hi to him, and that was like one of the best moments of my life. I just love Tim Allen.
Did you nerd out on him, or?
I didn't, because he's like a really like quiet guy, and I was afraid to even like say hi to him. I had heard from some valet people before that he doesn't really like to like interact, but I couldn't help myself, so I at least had to say hi. And he said hi, and it was fine. It was great, and I was, the help because I was working a wedding, so I didn't want to be like too weird. But I just couldn't help myself. And I love that. I mean, come on, he's from Detroit. So who doesn't love that on Home Improvement? He was always wearing like the Lions and the Red Wings and the Tigers and Michigan State and Central and Wayne State. And I mean, they lived in Detroit, and it was like, awesome. And
there's always a rumor that he lived on Orchard Lake. I don't know if that was ever confirmed or not. But
I don't know either, but I would believe it. I mean, I'm pretty sure he still lives here. He does all the Pure Michigan commercials.
Yep. Which are going away, by the way.
Which is sad.
Yeah. I always heard that he lived on Old Orchard Trail. You remember that road?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It was like the shortcut to get to West Bloomfield from Commerce.
Yep.
Just going around the lake. There was like a big blue house on Old Orchard Trail it wasn't on the lake because it was like a rocky cliff there, but it was had a lake view.
Yeah. That only one car could go down at a time, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Never verified if that was his house or not.
Yep.
But
I don't know if it was or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was, because those are some big, nice houses right there. Orchard Lake.
I love that show. I love Tim Allen. That was definitely appointment TV for me when I was growing up. That was another one that I did not miss ever. And like I said, I if I were to rethink my list, that would probably be on my list. And have you seen his new show, Last Man Standing? Is that any good?
Okay. When Last Man Standing first came out, I started watching it, and I was like, I couldn't really get into it because I loved Home Improvement so much that it was hard to watch, because now here he is married and has 3 daughters. And I couldn't do it. Well, then my dad really got into it and was like, you have to watch this. This is hilarious. Okay. Since then, I've now seen Last Man Standing every episode, probably like 5 times. It's another show.
Is it still on?
It's on. It's still on. The new season comes out in January. It was canceled for a while by ABC, and then Fox picked it up. But it's hilarious. And it's also on CMT, like reruns of it. Like Home Improvement's on for like 2 hours, and then Last Man Standing's on for 2 hours on CMT. So CMT loves Tim Allen, apparently.
Does that hold up? Does Last Man Standing hold up? Is that worth going back and watching season 1?
It's hilarious. It's so, like, Tim Allen, if you know, I mean, I don't want to get political, but he's a big Republican. He makes a lot of, political jokes within the show, but it's not one-sided, because the daughters then make, political jokes back the other way. He has I think it's in season 2, he has, there's black neighbors that move in. And they make racist jokes back and forth to each other. And it's hilarious. And I'm like, you're watching the show going, I can't believe they're like getting away with some of these jokes that they're getting away with. But it's so funny because it's back and forth. It's both sides of everything. And the show is hilarious. I think it's awesome. I think it's really good. If you could get past the fact that it's not actually Home Improvement, because that took me a minute to be able to. But there's great. I mean, his wife from Home Improvement, Jill, makes a guest appearance in a couple episodes. Jonathan Taylor Thomas is in a couple episodes.
No kidding.
Yep. Karn, Al from the show. Richard Karn is in a couple episodes. I think those are the only ones from Home Improvement, but it's great. And then they make references, like inside jokes about, Home Improvement and stuff. So it's good. It's definitely worth watching. And I believe that one's also on Hulu. So maybe put that one on your list to watch eventually too.
Yeah, I will do that. So yeah, good choice with Home Improvement. I love that show. I'm glad you mentioned it, so we got to talk about it. So my number, what are we on, number 2 now?
2. Yep, you're number 2.
My number 2 is Wonder Years.
Love the Wonder Years.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's not a show that I can recall, specific things that happened, like, say, Home Improvement, because it's still on all the time. But the Wonder Years was such another, like, I feel like an important show of that time. It dealt with a lot of, like, more youth issues, because Kevin, I think, was his name in the show. Yep. He was Fred closer Savage. Closer to Agent Us, I think, at the time, versus like a 90210 where they were in high school. And the theme song of this show, one of my all-time favorite songs.
Joe Cocker, yeah. Yep. And if you watch reruns though, they play a different version. I think it's something to do with it's something to do with licensing. It's the same song, but I don't know if it's Joe Cocker or not.
Well, the original version of the song is by the Beatles, and then Joe Cocker redoes it. But I personally prefer the Joe Cocker version also.
Yeah, same here. And there's actually 2 different versions of the song, and they don't use the original version on the when it was on streaming on Netflix. I think it was. I don't know if it's on Netflix anymore, but when it was, they used like a different version.
I'll have to check that out.
So I was kind of bummed out by that. And then also, I don't know if you've noticed this, but a lot of old TV shows, if they use like real songs in their shows, when there must have been some kind of snafu with the licensing when everything went streaming. So a lot of times if you watch these old shows, they don't have some of the original songs that they played in it, so they replace them with.
That's interesting, but also not surprising.
So I was kind of bummed out. I think Wonder Years was one of those shows where I was watching. I remember like a specific song playing at a certain time, and it didn't happen. I'm like, oh man, that kind of sucks. It kind of ruins. Yeah, ruins the nostalgia of the whole show.
Yeah, playing the songs of that era and stuff like that.
But that was such a great show. I want to say that was on Thursdays. I might be wrong on that.
I honestly can't remember on this one what night it was on, but no, for some reason I feel like it was on Sunday.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, anyways, I don't know why, but yeah, I feel like this. And then there was another show that I used to watch after that. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, I feel like Sundays. Anyway,
It,
continue.
it was such a good glimpse of the 60s back then. It was that's what the big thing I loved is I just love I've always been drawn to the decade of the 60s
Yeah.
my whole life, and that's part of the reason why I love Mad Men so much. But that was my first exposure to the 60s, was watching the Wonder Years. His sister was a hippie,
Yeah.
and they touched down in the Vietnam draft, and you want to feel old if you there's more time between the time that when the Wonder Years was on and till now, there was a bigger gap between when the Wonder Years was supposedly happened and when it was actually aired. Does that make any sense?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, it does. That's crazy.
And same thing if you look at Back to the Future, more time has passed between when Back to the Future was released and now than if you were when Michael J. Fox went back in time. So Michael J. Fox went back 30 years. Well, more than 30 years has passed since Back to the Future.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Not to ruin your night or anything.
Right.
But
There was a meme I just saw the other day that said 2000 was 20 years ago. And it said, that's weird because 1980 was also just 20 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's why I love the Wonder Years. You got that glimpse of the 60s. They touched down on real issues, and the relationship between Kevin and Winnie. That was, I think you're right. We were right around that same age when that show aired. So I remember having like my first crush right around the same time. So you could really relate to Kevin Arnold and his family. So it was just a fun show to watch. So all right, Wonder Years at number 2. What do you have as your number 1?
Well, I think anybody that knows me, it knows that 90210 was already at number 3.
I know. I can't believe that wasn't your number 1. I was very surprised.
Well, like we said, the 90s was the era of the sitcom. So I have to have a sitcom as my number 1. And you and I can't have the same number 1. So my number 1 is Friends.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I mean, high school, this was a big show for us. It's funny thing is I actually don't think I watched this show from season 1, episode 1. I think I picked it up a little later. I feel like the very first episode I ever remember watching was when Ross gets married to Emily and says Rachel's name, which is the season finale of 4. After that, I went back and watched all of them, and I watched every episode since. This was a huge show that Amy and I were watching when we were in college, and all of our other college friends watched, and we all still talk about it. And when we're in our group chat, we're like sending, gifts from Friends and like just, funny little videos, and the way we talk sometimes, what we're saying is, all friends. And it's just one of those shows that I don't think is ever really going to go away. I think the show is probably going to like hold up and be popular for years and years to come.
I'm glad you put it as your number 1. I loved the show. I didn't watch it religiously though, so that's why I didn't make my list. So I was glad that when you put it on there, because it's definitely I respect the cultural importance of it, just like 90210. Yep. I did watch a lot more Friends than I did watch 90210, so I can definitely
relate a little bit more, a little bit more about it. Yeah,
and have conversations about it. I loved it. The episodes I did watch, I mean, there's some lines that like you said, like you still use to this day. Whenever I know what's big with my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my in-laws is the big pivot episode.
Oh, absolutely.
Whenever we're moving something together, somebody's got to yell pivot.
Absolutely. There are just so many little like Regina Phalange. That's a name that Phoebe used to use as her fake name. Like, and I constantly think of her name. Like, if I was going to use a fake name, it's probably the name I'd use. Or Joey always would say, "How you doing?" Like, there were just so many little like things from the show that still like hold true today and still just make me laugh and are still just, inside jokes between, me and all my good friends who watch the show. And it was such a fun show to watch and think about. Like, I mean, I have a family and I celebrate everything with my family, all the holidays and stuff. But here you have a group of friends living in New York who are basically each other's family, and they celebrated everything together and did everything together. And I think a lot of people found that to be really relatable and really cool. And, I feel like a lot of people probably strive to be like Friends. You have all your friends living in 2 apartments right next to each other. I mean, obviously Ross lived across the street and Phoebe lived God knows where with God knows who. But, I think it was kind of a dream for probably some people, like, "Ooh, I wish I lived in New York and had my best friends living right next door." And, It was just such a great show that so many people related to, and they were just such great characters, and they were all so different, and they all played their characters so well. And, they all went on to have fairly successful careers. I would, say Jennifer Aniston probably has the most successful, but,
Right.
they held strong together too. Like you mentioned with Big Bang Theory earlier, Friends, they bonded together, and they decided if one's getting a pay raise, we're all getting a pay raise. And at one point, I don't remember which season it started, but they were all getting $1 million an episode,
Yeah.
which is just crazy.
And that was huge news at the time too, because
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
a lot of. I mean, it still is a ton of money, and
Yeah.
I still don't think that much money is the norm for sitcom pay.
No.
A lot of cultural fashion impacts
absolutely.
Friends as well. With the guys, the front spike, which I still was rocking up until about 6 months ago, sadly. And then the girls, everybody had the Rachel haircut.
Oh, I had it.
For a little while, everybody,
Yep.
all the girls got that. It was like a little bit short, but curled at the bottom. I'm way out of my element here, but you know what I'm talking about.
I don't even know how to explain it either, but you're right. It was like, poofy at the top and then kind of curled under. And then she got her hair cut really short at one point, and people wanted to do that. Like, people wanted to be like Jennifer Aniston.
My all-time favorite episode was Ross and the leather pants episode.
Oh my gosh. That was the New Year's Eve and the New Year's resolution one. His resolution was to wear leather pants.
He gets stuck in that bathroom, and
oh my gosh.
He's trying to use water to because he I think he was going to the bathroom and
he couldn't pull them up.
Yeah, he couldn't pull the leather pants back up after he was done going to the bathroom. So then he tried using
lotion,
he tried using water,
powder.
lotion, and he couldn't.
I don't even know if I could pick a favorite episode. There's just so many for so many different reasons. I don't even know. I mean, the prom video comes to mind because that one's just like iconic. It's when Ross and Rachel get together, but it's probably not the funniest episode.
Do you remember the episode where Joey and Chandler get the recliners in their apartment,
yes.
and they don't want to leave?
Loungers. Yep.
Yeah, and they at the very end of they always have like a little bit after the credits were rolling. They would go back and show like a quick little snippet. Well, it showed them the building was like on fire. There was like a smoke alarm or something like that. And they're just sitting there. They don't want to get up because they're so comfortable in their chairs, and they're watching Beavis and Butthead, and they're laughing like Beavis and Butthead. While the building's on fire, and they're not leaving. And then the other funny thing about that episode, I remember where one of the girls, I think it was Monica or maybe even Rachel, they were trying to get their attention, but they were just so tuned in on the TV. Rachel's like, I'm taking my top off.
Taking off my top.
Yeah, and one of them had like a mirror or something. And it was Joey.
A spoon, I think.
Yeah, he's like, no, she's lying. He couldn't even turn around.
That's what I'm saying. There's just so many like little things in that show that now when I watch it, I almost don't watch the major parts. I watch like the little things that are happening because there's so many like little funny things that are happening that like you don't even notice, like you don't pick up on when you're watching it for the first time.
Yeah, and seeing David Schwimmer in Band of Brothers. David Schwimmer played this asshole Captain Sobel on Band of Brothers, and when he first comes out, I remember watching it for the first time. When he first comes on screen, I'm like, oh man, like I'm not gonna take this guy seriously.
Right.
This is Ross Geller. He's not gonna be a hard ass, but holy cow, he nailed it. He played like a military asshole to the T. Like he
really, I didn't watch Band of Brothers.
He steals the show for the first episode. Like he steals the complete show. He was awesome.
It's always so interesting to see people when you're so used to seeing them in one character, like be out of their element and then play something else. It is always hard at first.
Do you think we're ever going to see a Friends revival?
No, but what I do think we're going to see is something with all 6 of them together again. But I don't think it's going to be Friends. I don't think they're going to be playing their characters.
Not even a reunion episode, you don't think?
I don't think so. They've all been really adamant about not doing that. And the Marta Kaufman, and I can't think of the other guy, the producers, they really kind of wanted to leave Friends where it was at. But Jennifer Aniston's on Ellen quite a bit because they're like really good friends. And the last thing she did say was that they were looking to work on a project together. So I don't really know what that means, but they were all just together because if you saw the Jennifer Aniston picture that she put on Instagram that basically broke the internet.
Oh, yeah.
It was all 6 of them together. So as far as I've heard, they are possibly working on something, but nothing specific has been out. But I don't think we're going to see a Friends reunion like we've seen from some of these other shows.
I liked how they ended it. I think it was time to end it when they did end it. I would have loved to see more, but I felt like you don't want to overstay your welcome as a cultural icon of a
It was
TV
10
show.
seasons. It was good. I thought it was a good finale. I thought it was funny. They like leave the apartment, which is so sad because so much of it is like filmed in the apartment.
Right.
And somebody says, let's go get coffee. And Chandler says, where? Like, I mean, come on. They spent 50% of their time at Central Perk Coffee House. Like,
Yeah.
they're just, it was really cute. And they all put their keys down, and Rachel and Ross are together, and Chandler and Monica just had babies. And I thought it was a good finale for such a great, strong show.
It was. So speaking of knowing when to quit and wrapping up with a good finale and a controversial finale at that, my number one comes in as Seinfeld.
Yes.
You can't talk about 90s TV without talking about Seinfeld. Or Friends, for that matter.
This is a great pick. Yes, and like you, Seinfeld wasn't one that I like religiously watched, but I've seen enough Seinfeld to know, what's going on and who's who. And
Seinfeld was so important. Like I got onto Seinfeld late too. I don't think I started watching until like season 4, season 5, and my parents of all people were watching it, and I just happened to be downstairs on a Thursday night and they were watching it, and I don't even remember what episode it was, but I remember thinking like, man, this is actually pretty fucking funny. And I want to watch it. And everybody describes it as the show about nothing, and that's pretty much, I mean, that's a great description of it.
Nothing,
really
nothing
about
specific.
nothing. 90% of the show takes place in Jerry's apartment, and another 5% probably takes place in the coffee shop or the diner. And then there's also occasionally they'll go into one of their other apartments. But I felt like this was another one where I was really disappointed when they ended the show. I felt like they ended it a little bit too early.
Yeah.
And I felt like it could have gone on for many, many more seasons. And they kind of left it hanging. Like I could have sworn that if I were to put money on it, I would have bet that the show was coming back, because the last episode, they all get arrested for.
Okay, that's what I thought. That's the last episode, right? They're all in jail.
Yeah, they all get charged with Good Samaritan laws because they just watch some guy get mugged and they videotape it instead of helping the guy, which is so Seinfeld, and so so those characters, they just don't. They're such horrible people, but they're everybody,
Yes, exactly.
It was a good reflection of our culture. And but at the very ending, that shows them all in the jail cell. They're like, well, what now? And they're like, well, we're gone for a year and then we'll be back. So I could have sworn that they were gonna bring him back. And I feel like now, like, I don't think that all the episodes hold up quite as well as they used to. I thought they held up for a long time with the rewatchability factor. Some of the earlier seasons, like seasons 1 and seasons 2, are a little cringy. They're just not as entertaining as the later seasons. But there are some episodes that are just so damn funny with they'll never die. Like my favorite episode was the Frogger episode where George and Jerry go into their old pizza joint they used to go to after school in high school, and George sees the same Frogger machine that they used to play video games
Frogger.
on, and he sees that his high score is still on there after all these years. So they find out that the pizza shop is closing down. That's actually what brought them there in the first place. They found out that the pizza shop they used to hang out with was going down, or going under, shutting down, and they decided to go back for one final slice. And that's when George discovers his high score is still on the Frogger machine, and he decides that he wants to somehow transport the Frogger machine to his apartment and keep it to preserve his high score. Gosh. And the way he describes it to Jerry, Jerry's like kind of like, yeah, whatever. Why you want to do this? And George's like, Jerry, I'm never gonna have any children. This is all I got, pretty much.
My high score on Frogger.
They hire some weirdo guy that was actually on Prison Break. Did you watch Prison Break?
No. But okay, I know some of the people on it.
Do you remember the cosmonaut from Armageddon, the Russian?
Yeah.
So the Russian, he plays a guy named Slippery Pete on that episode, and he basically hooked up a car battery to the Frogger machine, and they had to transport it across this busy ass New York street, and so to get it to the moving truck so they can get it to George's house, and there's just all sorts of traffic. I think they end up accidentally parked the truck on the wrong side of the road, and so Jerry's ready to give up, and George is like, no, he's like, I can do this. Jerry, I've been training for this my entire life. And then they switch it to an overview, like just like you know how Frogger is an overhead overview. and they turn the Frogger music on. So they're showing George, and they have the Frogger sound effects. He's going side to side, back and forth, trying to get this across the road, and eventually he crashes into it. That was my penultimate Seinfeld episode.
Your favorite episode about nothing.
Yes, and I tell my coworker Paul this all the time. If there's ever been a show that needs to be revived, it's Seinfeld, because so much is. I think the show would just kill nowadays. I
think there's so much nothing that they could talk about now. Like there's so many like new topics. You
throw in social media into the mix. You throw in the internet in the mix, online dating. The whole show pretty much revolved around Jerry's dating life. I mean, Jerry, he was just constantly dating somebody and getting dumped. Or
was it him or George that dated a girl that died from licking envelopes?
I think. I
feel like it was George.
I think it might have been George. Yes, it was George's wife.
Was it his wife?
His wife to be, his fiancee Susan.
Oh, was she licking envelopes for the wedding invitations?
Yes,
maybe?
For their wedding invitations.
Yes. Yeah, I haven't seen a ton, but I've seen that. I've seen the soup Nazi, obviously. Like everybody knows about the soup Nazi.
Soup Nazi's overrated, though. That was a fun
and I'm
episode.
not saying it's not. I just feel like everybody knows about that one.
Everybody mentions Soup Nazi when they talk about Seinfeld. I felt that was okay, but I felt there's so many other funny episodes. Like, what's the guy's name? Patrick. The guy that played Putty on that show.
Oh, Patrick Warburton. Okay.
Warburton, that's it. He's in Family.
Oh, yeah, okay.
He's the voice in Family Guy. He's been in a couple movies. He's been in a couple shows. He was in that show with Oliver Hudson that was on very short. It was on for like a year or two, where it was about Oliver Hudson. He was married to a young girl his age, and then Patrick played the older couple that they were friends with.
Oh my gosh,
Anyways,
I cannot think of that show, and I know what it was because I really like Oliver Hudson.
Putty was hysterical on Seinfeld, and so there's a lot of big actors that cycled through that show at one time or another, and you don't really catch it until you watch it years and years later. But of all the people, though, I mean, like Jerry is obviously still killing it, and he's still doing the stand-up comedy thing, and he did like the B movie, but I feel like Elaine.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
I feel like Julia Louis-Dreyfus has succeeded the most out of the whole cast.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she's had a rock star career on Veep. I mean, awards up the wazoo. Like, she's doing fabulous. I think this is the last season of Veep, so maybe that frees up her schedule a bit, and maybe we will see some sort of,
I don't think they're gonna
eventually.
I don't think they're ever gonna do it, though. I think the closest we're ever gonna get was what I was talking about earlier with Curb Your Enthusiasm. Yeah, I just don't think any of them are interested in doing it. Jerry's convinced that it's just it was at its peak when they went out, and they just want to leave it at that.
Yeah.
It's just so.
Which I respect that too, but I do agree with you that there's so much new material for them that they would do well.
The elephant in the room, you can't really bring Michael Richards back onto network TV after what he did.
This is true.
A little bit of a problem with he went full racist on stage, and so
that is right.
Yeah, so that you can't really bring back.
Gosh, I kind of forgot about that until you brought it up.
Yeah, you can't really bring him back without.
So the revival couldn't be on network TV.
No, but I just wish that if any show that could come back, that would be the one. Just so much has changed in the world since Seinfeld was last on. I just feel like there's so much that they could pick on nowadays. So, all right, well, I think we have some good lists here. What a good
what a fun discussion.
Yes, yeah. So I think this is going to wrap up our 90s mini pods, if you will. I think this is a good way to end it. We're coming up on the new year in a couple weeks here, and we just had it. Our reunion is over. We talked about the movies, we talked about the TV, and now we can revisit it in 10 years.
Yeah. Which will fly by, which is just crazy.
I know, right?
So we'll wrap up the 90s and 99 in our reunion, and I'm sure we'll find something else great and exciting to talk about, though.
Yep, definitely.
Plenty of stuff out there.
All right, well, I think this is a good place to stop, and we will catch you next time.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me again. It was great.
Thank you.
Talk to you.
All right, that's all we got for today. Just wanted to say an extra special thanks to Erin Miller for joining me again. Until next time, keep it real.